Hi, I'm Esther.
And I'm Shaun.
I write about AI news here at TechTarget.
And I edit Esther's stories.
We're here to talk to tech experts about everything AI, from open and closed models to AI agents and who's ahead in the generative AI race.
And even the elusive AGI.
We've got it covered, right, Shaun?
Yep, we've got it covered.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Targeting AI podcast from Informa TechTarget, co-hosted by my editor, Shaun Sutner, and me, Esther Shittu. Today, we're talking with Bruno Aziza, Vice President of Data, AI, and Analytics at IBM. Before moving over to IBM, Bruno was the head of data and analytics at Google, and before then, he was at Oracle. Thank you so much for joining us, Bruno.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so to kick off, Bruno, you have worked with three of the tech giants now. So I'm not going to say which is the best, but what would you say is the common thread between the three, and what's the common challenge you see them trying to address?
Shaun, so thanks first for having me. You're right. I have worked for some incredible hyperscalers and large companies. I've also done 4 startups, 2 of which sold, and I had the opportunity to work at Business Objects when we went IPO, and then we made these incredible acquisitions like Crystal Reports, if you remember them. The challenge is really, if you work it back from the customer, is how do you enable customers to innovate with their data? You realize it's been really the constant here is data is your differentiated power as an organization. And the issue is, how do you put it in front of the right people? How do you put it in front of the right machines so you can out-compete and out-innovate your market? And so I think the mission has been kind of standard for all the companies I've worked at. I've only worked in data, AI, and analytics. And the answer really starts from the customer out, is how can we help them innovate and out-compete in a fairly fast-moving market? It's actually accelerating, if you believe it.
No, we believe how fast it's moving. I think we experience it every day as much as you too. So in May, it was IBM Think Conference in Boston, and IBM introduced new tools and expanded on its Orchestrate platform. Before diving into that, I want to go back to when IBM rebranded from Watson from what it was into what it is now. What was the original strategy behind the rebrand? What was the catalyst for the rebrand? And how has the strategy grown and evolved?
So first of all, I've only been at the company 7 or 8 months, so I can't tell you about the history of the last 20 years of the company. But one thing I can tell you that's happened over the last 8 months that I've been here, one is great customers. If you attended the IBM Think conference, you've heard from companies like PepsiCo and L'Oreal and Slack and Heineken and the UFC. And so I think you get to experience directly from the people that are succeeding in the industry, what it's like, what's their playbook. So I think that's the first bit here. We've also had the opportunity to create great partnerships and acquisitions inside the ecosystem. We just completed the DataStax acquisition. Recently, we announced our intention to deploy an AI labs on the East Coast. So we're really making a lot of progress working with the ecosystem as well. And then finally, new products, which we introduced, and I'm sure we'll get to talk about them here, but around the area of agent and automation, product called Orchestrate. So everybody should really look at this product if they're listening or watching us. And then a new way to think about your data platform. New workloads are coming in together, structured and unstructured, analytics, transactional systems, converging. And so going back to the earlier question, if you are on the mission to enable organizations to out-innovate, out-compete with their data, you're starting to see now these data, AI, and agentic platforms converging. And we believe that we lead there because, of course, of our huge heritage with the enterprise, understanding their business flow and business processes, but also a great experience on on-prem applications, as well as a platform that cuts across all clouds, which is very unique in this space.
All right, so just in the old days of AI, IBM had Watson, which is a big, huge system. Now, seems to me your strategy has evolved toward smaller models, customization, open source, and governance. So how is that resonating with customers?
That's correct, and I think it's just entirely driven by the customers. I think you said it earlier. We have the incredible, chance or opportunity to work with some of the largest organizations in the industry that are building critical workloads in critical industries. So, we're in the front row, I think, of true transformation that has an impact on the economy and the impact on a lot of people. And so when you look at their requirements, they absolutely need to avoid lock-in at all costs, right? So that's lock-in of being locked in one cloud or being locked in into one application. And IBM really is the only company that cuts across all these applications and all these clouds. Second, they want optimization, and optimization comes in multiple flavors. The first, most obvious one is cost optimization. There's also performance optimization. And then the third one you just talked about is optimization for governance. When you're driving data solutions, you want to know what data you trained it on. And I think IBM is one of the few companies to be very transparent around how our models are being trained. We'll also give you tools to build your own models and optimize these models. And so I think if you think about these three pillars, openness, being able to cut across applications and silos, optimization, across performance, cost, and governance, we are really in a great position to help these organizations, mature to this new era while not forgetting the great work that they've done in the past. I think that's probably one of the biggest, gotchas of this industry is, well, there's a lot of excitement going out and building new stuff. You also have to take a really good account on what you've been building for generations and making sure you're also taking advantage of that. Just one example of an organization I was just working with recently, I asked them about their automation workflows, how much of it was agentic versus automated. And what they told me is that this is a bank. 30% of it was net new agents, 70% was traditional rules and tools that they built over multiple decades where they had really best practices around that. So I think what we'll discover as we learn a lot more from people in production, and remember, we focus on production at scale of AI systems, we're learning that the questions they're asking are different from what they might be doing in experimentation.
Thanks.
That's interesting. IBM introduced Orchestrate and Watson X Orchestrate in 2022, and this year I think Orchestrate included new capabilities for agentic AI. What is IBM's strategy regarding agentic AI? How do you see that growing?
Great question, because I think it's on everybody's mind. How should you innovate with agents? And so the first, I think, requirement, what we're learning from customers that are winning the space, and by the way, this is a very tough market today because there's a lot of excitement, a lot of experimentation, but not a lot of success in production. I think the stat in the market is 16% of organizations are deploying in the enterprise at scale. So there's a very small sample of organizations that are truly succeeding. And I guess we're pretty fortunate to be working with many of them, like what we had PepsiCo and Slack and L'Oreal on stage. The requirements is I need a platform that allows me to build, run, and manage my agentic framework. And what I mean by that is, again, it could be a net new agent, it could be rules and tools from the past, and it's marrying these two things. So one, I need to be able to, build them. So building them might mean I'm building them on the IBM platform, or I'm building them on a partner platform. We have a great agent catalog that accelerates, I think, and it allows you to get into market 75% faster than anyone you could see out there. So building is an important requirement. But the second part of it is also running them in a platform where these agents can actually work together. And so what's interesting about the verb or the word that we use for this product called orchestrate is the key value is in the orchestration of those agents. And orchestration comes in many flavors. It's orchestration and collaboration, but also governance of these agents. So what we introduced with Orchestrate is 150 pre-built agents. So not only can you build from scratch, but you're going to also take advantage of the great know-how that we've accumulated over decades. So you can customize on top of the pre-built agents we've made available for you, and they span across HR, sales, procurement, IT, customer service. These agents also use, if you will, integration with applications. We announced over 80 enterprise application integrations, and that's, think about a system like Salesforce or SAP or Oracle or Workday or Microsoft or Adobe. And then we've also now produced this catalog where you can essentially help yourself to these various agents. So you can essentially build, run, and manage those agents at scale across hybrid environment. I think really that's the key here, is that we don't want this platform to be locked into an application concept or maybe a cloud framework. It really needs to cut across, because like I'm sure many of our customers, you too, when you do your job on a daily basis, you're having to work across multiple applications. And so we don't want to be limited to just one application silo, one cloud. So you can really innovate across your enterprise.
Okay, so IBM is known not only for watsonx pretty widely, but now Orchestrate, but also you have your Granite line of models, open source. So open source, last year seemed to be gaining a lot of strength, and still is. So what are your thoughts on the importance of open source in today's AI market, and how can open source and proprietary source work together to help enterprises?
Critical. So open source is critical for many reasons. I think, embracing the community for any organization, the ability to hire developers who have grown in the open source community is also critically important to your ability to innovate. So it's not just a technology conversation, it's also a talent conversation. On your questions on models, I think what we're seeing is that customers are going to have a dual strategy from a model standpoint. There is certainly a lot of value in using large language models, and there's great providers and great partners we work with that we run on our platform and we make it available to our customers. And there's also the need to work on small models, because what happens is you might not want to spend a large amount of money on using a model that is trained on data that is not relevant to your question. You might instead want to build your own model on your own data, on your own premise, so you can own that IP and make it extremely relevant to the business context. And so what's happening in the market is, I think you'll see that as companies are going production maturing and as they're deploying their use cases, is they're kind of mix and matching the use of large language models when they make sense and the use of small language models when they make sense. It'll allow them to have better results, it'll allow them to be more efficient, and also serve various populations inside the organizations a little better than just using a large language model or having to build a large language model by themselves.
Okay, thanks for that. Quick follow up. It just occurred to me that among all the big tech companies, the tech giants, if you will, IBM is the only one that's chosen not to have a consumer facing AI chatbot, which I think is pretty interesting. Can you speak to that at all?
So our focus is really around enterprise AI and enterprise AI adoption. We have lots of solutions to enable customers to build their own chatbot. I mean, one of them is watsonx.ai. Watsonx.governance is also a great platform for customers to use. So really what we're focused on is enabling some of the best organizations in the world that want to innovate to build their applications. So they most likely will use our own application stack to build their own customer applications. Now, what's interesting is that the large majority of use cases that we see today are in fact internally facing. If you look at all the use cases that you might want to go after today as an enterprise listening to us, I think the two that are coming up really very often is around software engineering. So clearly enabling and up-leveling the output of your engineering organization. And so you can see that with code assistance and so forth. And also functions like customer support, sales and marketing. And so a lot of those, if you think about them, they're really directed primarily at your employees. So the employee is the first customer for the enterprise. And then, of course, that translates into value for the end consumer. But I think that's where most of the use cases are today.
I wanted you to kind of dial back because I think one of the things you mentioned, and maybe I got you wrong, you were talking about talent when it comes to open source. I wanted you to, dive a little bit deep into that. And also, how do you think that IBM mitigate the challenges that come with open source? Because obviously, open source, as Shaun mentioned, was really all the rage last year, and still, there's still traction in it, but there have been many people who have talked about the challenge of it not having as much support and all of that.
So on the talent question, if you roll back to just a few years ago, when you're asking customers, why is it that you can't innovate fast enough? The primary answer is going to be talent scarcity. It's really hard to identify people that are in my organization that I can kind of get into a team and innovate with data, or it's even hard to hire the best people because they're probably working already at a great company and doing great work. And so I think talent has been and probably will always be a challenge for a leader in general, because you can't have enough great talent, right? So you always want to get great talent. So in terms of how we help with that is we really focus on the clients that we work with, the enterprise clients, and the best thing about talent is success. So getting them to success and getting them to production, which, like I said, again, there's a huge expectancy that there will be a huge return on investment. I think it's in the industry is 85% of leaders expect an ROI on Gen AI by 2027, but the reality is less than a quarter today actually have experienced that. So I think there's a huge amount of frustration today, and then the number one, mitigation to that is having a good strategy and having the right people to deploy it. In terms of open source versus closed source, I think the reality is the choice has to be from the customer, and it's a choice around what they've decided to do and how they can harness their data. There's a change here in the industry, which is really quite transformative. And if you look at the last 30 years of the industry, has been really focused on structured information. We've built great systems, great data warehousing. We just had a few years ago this whole craze around the modern data stack. And the answer of the modern data stack was really around structured data and analytics. And I think what's happening now is that we're moving past that. We're moving into the modern data and AI stack, maybe. And that's really a challenge for organizations because 99% of their enterprise data is untouched by AI today because they had orchestrated for structured data. And it turns out a huge amount of their valuable knowledge is stored in documents and unstructured information. That data is growing much faster than the structured data. So they're really challenged to figure out, okay, where do I pick the right innovation? And so having the ability to work with a partner like IBM that has both the ability to tap into open source and the ability to tap into every other piece of software and orchestrate that for you is really unique, right? Because if you're partnering with, let's say, a cloud vendor or an application vendor that is really devoted to their vertical integration, it's going to be really hard for you to not fall into the lock-in trap. And so I think that's how organizations think about it, is that they think about their innovation, their talents, and then the data and AI strategy that is changing on them, where they might have committed maybe to a close type of software for their data warehousing solution. And now they got to look out and be as open as they can and work with a company like IBM that can enable them to optimize their environment. I think the key of both choice and simplicity will go through a vendor that allows you, or partner that allows you to optimize across a fairly complex world of options out there.
Okay, so staying on the data theme, IBM recently introduced Watson X Data. So what is IBM's strategy for data? Oh, and also this occurred to me, I don't know if this is directly related, but do your consulting divisions, are they an integral part of your AI strategy as well and your data strategy?
We learned a lot from the consulting engagements. They have really top talent and great projects they're working on. So I think for us, it's additional data points, additional ways of accelerating the journey of our customers to really getting value out of AI. I think really the issue today is, the number one issue for a customer is am I getting value out of what I'm doing, right? So if you look at, the cost equation for standing up a data and AI stack today, it's fairly high. And then you have a large amount of time you have to wait before you see any of the value. And so the job here is how do I accelerate that? And I'm going to accelerate that by having better software, but also have better knowledge. And consulting is certainly a big part of that. On the data strategy, it really is pretty straightforward. It's looking out to the future, right? If you want to go out and skate where the puck is going to be, there are things that you can use from the past, but there's certainly things that you got to design for very differently. And so the thing that's interesting about the past is that we know that the number one blocker today is the inability to have options. And so we've designed with our product, and you just named it, What's Next Data, a platform that allows you to have an insane amount of options and a great return on investment, right? We're focused on accuracy and reduction of cost, because we know today that is a huge issue for organizations. We focus on converged workloads, so structured and unstructured data, analytics and OLTP environment, and this idea of choice, where you can use open source, you can use some of our software, and we're really going to guide your experience and optimize it. So you have with you a platform that follows you along your journey. A great example, just to go back to the agentic example earlier, because the data platform is now highly connected with your agentic strategy. I think that might be one of the concepts that organizations haven't thought about, or maybe vendors haven't thought about. Today you think about a vendor that's in the data space and a vendor that's in the agentic space for organization. But the way we think about it, these two things are in fact highly related. So your data platform needs to be open and integrated with your agentic platform, and it needs to take into account the new agents that you're going to build, as well as the existing rules and tools that you've had in place inside your organization. So the answer is going to be across these things, right? So openness of platform, so we can kind of incorporate our strategy within your existing environment. No customer that we work with is starting from scratch, so they already have assets that we are open to and integrating with. And then this idea that now we can take a looking out to the future and help you to optimize so you can get more value faster from your data.
I find it interesting because you're talking about providing choice. And I almost want to ask you to expand on that, because, other vendors also provide choice. So what makes your choice, I guess, a little bit more unique?
It's a great question. So let me maybe give you a little bit more definition. So today, if you are in the market to look for modern data stack or data and AI stack, you really have three options. Option one is you've really latched on to the cloud hyperscaler strategy, which many of them are partners and they have incredible technology. In that choice, one of the requirements you're going to have to think about is how much of your data is in fact hosted with this hyperscaler. So how much of your data is in Amazon? How much of your data is in Google? How much of your data is in Azure? Because ideally, if you have a lot of your data in that cloud, you can now tap into the vertical integration of that vendor, so you can get services that relate to compute, governance, agentic services, et cetera, et cetera. This works well if you have a large amount of your data in that cloud. The problem, the reality of the enterprise, is they have data everywhere. They have data on-premise, they have data in multiple clouds. So how can you cut across those clouds? The second option you have is go and partner with an application vendor. It might be a Salesforce or Workday, and say, you know what, they have incredible technology, and I want to build on top of that. Some of them have a data cloud. I want to store my data with them, and I want to build on top of the workflows they've created. To their benefit, they have a great level of understanding of the business process for that application silo. The opportunity here is great for you. The challenge is, of course, you're probably using more than one application. If you're a salesperson, you're using a CRM application, and you're probably using a productivity application. So now you're having to cut across silos. So that's your second option. The requirement is that you're making a bet on the CRM vendor, the CRP vendor is how I'm going to run my entire company. Very hard to make that bet. The third one is to think horizontally and have a partner like IBM that allows you to build your strategy regardless where your data is. If your data is in AWS, Azure, and GCP, we are the only vendor that's going to enable you to seamlessly integrate across all these data sources. If your data is in Salesforce and Workday, SuccessFactors, we're the only vendor that will allow you to build agents that collaborate and are orchestrated across multiple clouds and multiple applications. So that's what I meant when I meant choice, is that the reality of the enterprise is it's fairly complex environment, primarily due to, the complexity of their business and the sophistication of their needs. And so instead of trying to just lock them into one silo, we want to just take advantage of the best practices that they've taken and then get them to the next level by giving them optionality.
So when I wrote my story last month about IBM and like last month I meant in May, some analysts mentioned there's a need for IBM to tell a better story in terms of how IBM uses all the products it has and how it can be helpful for enterprises. So basically, expanding the story and letting enterprises, I guess, giving enterprises better knowledge of what you have. Do you agree with that?
I think the best way to help our customers is, in fact, to connect them with other organizations that have succeeded. Of course, as a product leader, I'm going to tell you why my products are great. That's what you would expect. And that might be helpful, but I'd rather connect you with customers like PepsiCo, 320,000 employees. They serve what they call 1.4 billion miles a day using generative AI. I think about L'Oreal, 3,000 customers, 3,000 users across 60 countries. They're innovated with planning, analytics, and Orchestrate. NatWest, I just saw the CIO just a few weeks ago deployed an application called Cora, 11 million interactions, and a customer satisfaction a bump of over 100%. That, I think, is probably the best way that I can help customers. Is we have the incredible fortune, I would say, to work with organizations that have deployed at scale in production. And so if I can, be a channel to that community, I think I will help my prospects and my customers better than trying to come out with some, poetic and romantic story around my product stack. Of course, I can tell you all day long why they're the best, but I think the results show for themselves, and the results are with the customers.
Okay, staying on the theme of customers, when I covered IBM Think 2 years ago, customers were talking a lot about using Watson X to modernize legacy code, and IBM has a lot of loyal, decades-long customers. So, do you see that as that area of application for Watson X as being a major use case?
So if you look at all the use cases that organizations have, I definitely think that code is a huge opportunity for boosting productivity. The second one is around customer support, marketing, and sales, the creation of content, the personalization at scale. So yes, I do think that the use cases where customers at scale, right? Again, I mean, we're talking to the use case of large enterprises, multinational enterprises that need to run critical, business critical workloads. I do think that if you're a product organization, code is extremely important. And if you're a sales organization, the ability to hyper personalize your offer using AI at a very low cost is certainly very differentiated.
Thanks.
I wanted to go a little bit wider now, take a wider lens at, the industry as a whole. There is idea that we're moving from experimentation to implementation. Do you agree with that? And what would you say that IBM fits into that implementation?
Absolutely. I think you're 100% right. I think the last 18 months have shown a lot of experimentation. And I think, like I said earlier, it's a very small amount of organizations are getting to production. There are 5 things that I've learned from organizations that are in production that they really do much better than anybody else. The first one is the ruthless focus on use case value. The leaders that I've observed win in production is they've got a really good sense of the path to value and the metrics for success. Sometimes it's revenue, sometimes it's productivity. But they're really focused on that, very focused on growth. The second thing to do is what I call, how we call product market fit, PMF, in the startup world or even in product world. And I think it's people market fit. What I mean by that is they hire or they've identified employees who are really, really good product owners because they are owning from the data acquisition to the data activation. And so they're building teams that understand that. So use case prioritization, people. Third is they avoid lock-in at all costs. They've really understood that one of the issues that they might have had in the past is they locked themselves in one data silo, one application silo, and they realize, oh, that's not the reality of my world. My data is everywhere, and I'm using multiple applications. So how to enable that in the new world? The fourth thing is that they take governance very, very seriously. It's not a sexy topic, but they in fact start with governance. And it's a lot cheaper to start with governance than to deploy your system and then think about governance because you probably have to start over. And then the fifth and last thing that they do is they're very customer centric. And what I mean earlier, Shaun was asking me, what customer facing or consumer facing use cases. The majority of the in production use cases are first focused on your employees. And so these leaders use they're in the product business. Essentially, they use the job to be done theory to understand how do I help my customers, my employees in this case, to be as productive as they can. How do I remove the friction they have to deal with today so that they can help my organization, achieve its goal? I mean, at IBM ourselves, we use this application called the HR Web, which is the way we interface with our HR applications. And I can tell you, I mean, it's a chatbot that interfaces with an application. I never go into that application. And it just gives me such a jump in productivity when I want to take a day off or when I want to apply for someone's training or promote someone or do any process related to HR. I don't go into an application. I go into an agent that we built for ourselves. And so those are the examples of in the practices that I see. We can talk more about the details, but I really encourage folks to try and audit themselves against these 5 best practices and also identify customers you've heard. One of the great benefits of going to an event like IBM Think is you don't have to call me. The people on stage and you should reach out to them and ask them how they got to where they got.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up this podcast, what's in the future for IBM, for Watson X, for the Granite models, and what's after agentic? What's the next big wave of AI?
The thing they say about prediction, right? It's really hard to predict the future. And so it's difficult for me to tell you with high certainty what's going to happen, but I will tell you that there is a trend I've been watching called systems of intelligence. And everyone's been focused on this idea that, we've kind of evolved through systems of record to system of engagement to now system of intelligence. And I think the thing that happens after that is systems of action. And what I mean by that is, what is an idea without an action? And so what is intelligence without actually acting on it? And I think that's the area we're about to walk into. Now, there are a few things to consider. The first thing is, well, who takes action? Humans take action. Agents take action, and automation rules take action. So now if you think about that, you got to break down the principles for your own platform and maybe even your own strategy. Maybe this is not a technology question, but when you think about actions, there's a few principles you need to think about. First one is you probably need autonomy. So how do you define the rules of autonomy through your action system? The second thing is you need to think about accountability. How do I go and get a good level of understanding of the data that originated into this decision or this action that was taken? And then finally, you need agency. What I mean by that is the ability to actually enact the action all the way to its end and then measure the impact of that. And so I think as we mature into this production phase, people will start seeing how they can build systems of actions for themselves and move past the system of intelligence that everyone's been talking about, I think, since 2017.
Thanks. Great insight.
Yeah, I love that system of actions. Thank you so much, Bruno. Where can people find you?
Well, thanks for having me first. I think the main place to find me is on LinkedIn. You can Google me if you'd like. Bruno Aziza. My last name reads forward and backwards the same way, so it's really easy to find me. Like my wife says, we're lucky there's only one of me. So you're most likely, if you're Googling me, you're just going to find one person and that'd be me.
That's great. Thank you so much, Bruno. Thank you for stopping by on the Targeting AI podcast. And to our audience, our viewers, please feel free to look at Informa TechTarget's website, where you will see multiple articles on IBM, Watson X, and the Grand Knight models. And please feel free to share, leave a review, like, subscribe, all the good things on this podcast. And we will see you next time on the Targeting AI podcast.
To hear the full audio podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Audible, TuneIn, Podbean, and other popular podcast platforms.